Hi everyone, this is Brittany from Made for Math. Thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to be doing a lesson on ratios. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to discuss is what is a ratio? Well, a ratio is a comparison of two amounts or two quantities. So let's start with a very simple example. If in my fruit basket I had these apples and these oranges, then I can figure out the ratio of apples to oranges. This ratio can be written in three different ways. So the first way is to just simply write it as a ratio of 2 apples to 3 oranges. The second way is to use a colon. This colon is just a kind of abbreviation of 2 to 3. And then the last way we can represent the ratio is to write it as a fraction or to use division, because we can write it as 2 over 3, or if you're familiar with division and fractions, you know that 2 over 3 is the same as 2 divided by 3. So those are three ways to write it. Now, another important note that I'm going to add on here is that with ratios, order matters. Okay, so for example, if I had switched this to be the ratio of oranges to apples, well, no longer is this going to be 2 to 3. That would now make it a ratio of 3 to 2. Okay, and if you think about it in terms of the fraction, if I wrote the fraction 3 over 2, that fraction is not equivalent to the fraction 2/3. So we do need to follow the order that the ratio is stated in. Okay, so before we look at some more examples, let's talk about just some examples of where we see ratios in real life. One example is in advertising. On this one, they're talking about how people prefer Domino's over Subway. For every 2 people that prefer Domino's, they're saying that only 1 person prefers Subway sandwiches. That's a ratio, 2 to 1. Another example is with TVs. The screens, the aspect ratio, we call it, is a ratio. So these show you some of the different ratios based on your TV screen size. Baking or cooking. We use ratios all the time. What's the ratio of dry ingredients to wet ingredients? The ratio of eggs to flour. And then another example I found was this was comparing pay. So a ratio of how much a CEO makes versus how much their workers make. You can see the ratio is quite large there. So interesting. So ratios are all around us if we think about, I'm sure you could think about many more examples. So now let's just do a few examples of how do we write a ratio. So another common ratio you hear is a student to teacher ratio. Oftentimes we're looking for a lower ratio of teachers to students because we want smaller class sizes. So in this example, we have 1 teacher to 10 students. Notice I made a pattern of 10 here. We do that a lot at Made for Math. We try to put visuals and patterns to make it easier to recognize. That's called subitizing. So it's a 1 to 10 ratio. Okay, we could not write that as 10 to 1 because that would be the wrong order. We have to go in the order of how it's written. We could also write it using a colon or writing it as a fraction. The 1 would need to go in the numerator because that's the first part of the ratio, and the denominator is the second part of the ratio, 1 to 10. Okay, so now what if we changed it and we wanted to write the ratio of boys to girls in the class? Well, we can see that there are 5 boys to every 5 girls. You could also write that as 5 to 5, or we could write that as the fraction 5 over 5. Now, since we know that the fraction bar really means division, this really means 5 divided by 5. Well, if we know 5 divided by 5, we know now that this is actually a ratio of just 1 to 1. Okay, we could also represent that if I came over here to the online manipulatives I often use called Brain Camp. If we had 5 to 5 and we keep breaking that down, well, 4 to 4, 3 to 3, 2 to 2, we can see visually that's the same as 1 to 1. At Made for Math, we call that a copycat 1. Whenever the numerator and denominator are the same, it's a copycat, because a copycat is someone who copies someone else, right? So these are all copycat 1s. The quantity is 1 to 1. Okay, so the last example is the ratio of girls to students. So let's see, I'm going to change the color here. So girls, again, there's still 5. Students, so that part of the ratio, how many total students in the class? Well, there's 10. So we could also write that as 5 to 10, or we could write that as the fraction 5 over 10. Now, if I wanted to simplify this ratio like I did the last one, I could come over here. We have a ratio of 5 to 10. Well, if you can see, 5/10 would also be the same as 1/2, because 5 is half of 10 and 1 is half of 2. So these ratios are equivalent. I'm going to do a whole nother video on just equivalent ratios, but that's a good little just example of 2 equivalent ratios. So 5/10 is the same as 1/2. Okay, so we could do the same thing here if we went through and wrote the ratio of dogs to cats and all these examples. So let's see if we can do that. So dogs to cats would be 4 to 3, 4:3, or 4 over 3. The ratio of cats to dogs would be 3 to 4, 3 over 4, or 3:4. Okay, and then we could do the ratio of dogs to animals. Well, there's 4 dogs, and then, of course, both cats and dogs are animals. So together, how many animals are there? Well, 4 and 3 together make 7. So it's a ratio of 4 to 7. And then same thing we could do with cats. We have 3 cats to 7 animals. Okay. Well, I thank you for tuning in to my lesson on ratios. And next time I'll be talking about equivalent ratios. So I hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.